Yeah, I hate delivering bad news too. I appreciate the update, yeah. I'll speak with them and let you know how it goes. Thanks, bye-bye. It's difficult getting feedback on a budget or on costs that is off target from what you were expecting. However, that is the reality often when it comes to renovating or remodeling a kitchen, or any room in your home for that matter. Not everything is going to go according to plan. So you're over budget. What do you do now? Well, before we dive into that, let's just take a quick moment and look at the major three portions or three steps that make up a typical kitchen renovation, and how each of those steps will impact your budget. First, you have design and planning. This accounts for anything in the pre-remodel phase. It's also worth noting this doesn't just mean money spent on a kitchen designer or engineer, or even permit fees. There's also the budget of your time and how much of it you're going to spend running around visiting showrooms, shopping for different materials, talking to contractors. All of that is going to have a bigger impact on your budget, both in terms of time and cost than you might think. The second and likely most significant portion of your budget is going to be made up of materials. It includes everything from cabinets, appliances, flooring, tile, countertops, hardware, and the list goes on. Impact on budget here is relatively straightforward. The higher end finishes are simply going to cost more than the lower tier options. And then finally, we have workmanship and labor. This is where you'll typically find the most ambiguity when it comes to costs and fee structure and impact on your budget. It's not unheard of to wind up with two vastly different quotes using the exact same materials. To complicate things further, it doesn't necessarily mean the higher priced quote is going to be better. And there are a few reasons why one contractor or tiler or electrician may charge more than the next. I don't want to dive too far down this rabbit hole because there is so much variability when it comes to labor pricing. However, what I will say is it doesn't always come down to just the skill of that particular tradesperson, that particular tiler or electrician. It can also come down to their willingness to take on your particular project, or how busy their schedule and workload currently is. So what are you thinking about this budget? Where are you thinking about digging in? Materials first. Huh. Well, materials seem like the most obvious place to start when it comes to trimming down a budget, and there are savings to be had here. There are a few other things you need to consider. First up, you're probably not going to save quite as much as you think you are, and second, you need to take into account the labor cost to install those particular material choices. Let's say you have a soapstone countertop that is going to cost $100 a square foot. It is then going to cost another $50 a square foot to install that material. If you decide to change that material to granite, which let's say is 25% less and now only costs $75 a square foot, you don't automatically get to assume the same savings are applied to the installation or labor cost. So if you think of total savings in this example, it's less than 20%, actually closer to 17%, and you had to make a material compromise. You've strayed away from that initial material to something we're probably not as happy with, something that may not perform as well, and most certainly something that is probably not going to look exactly how we were hoping it would in the final design. So as you can see, in order to really cut into your budget in a meaningful way, you need to do this at a big scale. I'm talking about making material changes across the board. Things like cabinets, countertops, tile, hardware for your doors. It can even come down to your flooring. All of this is going to be a rather difficult task, a monumental one you might say, and will probably stray vastly away from that initial design or that initial goal you were hoping to get out of the kitchen renovation. So I think that knee-jerk reaction we get when we see numbers we aren't quite expecting is to initially start chopping away at our materials list and changing things up. But I do think that system is somewhat flawed. As you saw, there are savings to be had when swapping out materials in your project. But it can only take you so far, and it comes with a rather large compromise. You simply aren't including what you were truly hoping for in the first place. If you really want to make a dent in your overall budget, scale down your project. What I mean by this is reduce the scope, reduce the size of the overall renovation. That means less square footage, that means fewer costs. So if we think this from a building or renovation point of view, in that each square foot costs $100 to renovate, and you are planning a renovation of 500 square feet for a total budget of $50,000. It's important to understand though that this cost or this reduction isn't linear. Dropping 100 square feet from the renovation doesn't automatically mean you are going to save 20%. This is because not every square foot is equal. Each square foot of your kitchen renovation is going to cost a lot more than each square foot in the dining room. However, if you were to trim down just the kitchen portion of your renovation by a few square feet, this now affects every single line item in your budget. You have a few less square feet of flooring, a few less square feet of countertops, a few less cabinets, less hardware. You can start to see how those savings can really add up. However, there are several hurdles to this option, and the first one is that kitchens tend to have what I call the waterfall effect. One renovation or one portion of a renovation typically leads into another, which then leads into another. It is simple to start in the kitchen, but then you want to redo the floors. Oh, and they go through the entire main space. Now your kitchen renovation is pushing into the next rooms. That living space now may bump up against a staircase that needs to have some work done in order to tie into the new floors. You can really start to see how that waterfall effect can grow and grow and grow the overall scope of the renovation. Second major hurdle to reducing budget in this manner is that it's going to push up with some resistance, maybe from your designer and maybe from you. You've probably fallen in love with the design, or you have created a space that you just can't imagine going without now. After all, it's natural to want what we want, but have it cost less. This is a time to be brutally honest with yourself. If you can pull back and control that waterfall effect and really stay focused on the main remodel, those main goals at hand, you can massively impact the overall budget by controlling and reducing the overall scale. What if we simplify the overall space? Yeah, we have those custom built-in cabinets going in along the dining room. Is there an option to play around with them? Just simplify the overall design. Simplifying means taking away some of the complexity of the project. A simple project done well can be just as elegant as one far more complex. In kitchen renovations, this can often take the form of reducing some of those more custom built-in details. Things like excessive crown molding or ceiling details like coffered ceilings, and just reducing the overall scope. Not necessarily changing the materials, just reducing the amount of labor needed to install them. It can also take the form of simplifying your cabinet door fronts, something that reduces the cost as well. Or maybe swapping out kitchen hardware to something that is not quite as expensive. Maybe it's not quite as luxury or quite as luxury. Can you say that? Something that doesn't cost quite as much, but still has that same impact on the overall space. The hard part is these are probably all items you love, and they are typically what make a design what it is and give it that aesthetic. So at some point you need to reconcile the cost savings with what you are giving up, and that can be rather difficult. Certain items aren't going to change much when it comes to impacting the overall aesthetic, and they can be swapped out rather easily, while other items or other built-in details, other portions of that design can take a rather significant impact and change the overall aesthetic of the space. Naturally, in the design process, there are just some things that are out of our control. We're in a housing boom right now. Everybody is renovating, there's labor shortages all over the place, material costs are rising faster than we can keep track, and people are booked far ahead, driving up the cost of labor overall. Make these items cost any less, but we can control how much they're going to impact the overall design. It is best to take a real honest look at the project during the design stage. The last thing you want to do is try and make changes on the fly during construction. There is also no point in creating a beautiful design that is not economically feasible. Because during this design stage, we can start getting price checks to see if we're even in the right ballpark, and if not, this is the time to make changes. These are the difficult conversations to have with a client or between you and your partner. I know I've had them with my partner when we've gone through renovations. It's hard to cut things we truly want and love. Often we come up with a design and we become emotionally invested in seeing it through, almost at any cost. It can be challenging to let things go, but it is much better to do that now during the design stage in the studio before we've committed to a huge financial outlay, one that we might not actually be able to afford. Okay, so we're going to pull back on the whole design. We're going to axe the feature wall completely. Okay. And they're going to simplify the built-in cabinets. Oh, that's a good idea. They'll bring it... Okay, they're going to address it later on. That's fantastic. I'll crunch the numbers, but that should bring us back on budget. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate your help on this. Okay, bye-bye.